Okay, so now I think we ended up in the Cournot model, right? Ano ba tayo start? There's a nice picture here that's interesting. Okay. So this is it. This is the Cournot model. Okay. And everything essentially is the same thing as you had before. Meaning this is almost the same as simple monopolist. Especially this first one, which is two firms lang, a duopoly. Okay. Linear industry demand curve, ito pa rin siya. But this time, itong Q is broken up into two things, Q1 and Q2. So yung output ni 1 tsaka output ni 2. So hiwala yan, separately or independently determined yan. In fact, speaking from the language of last week of, general game theory concepts, Q1 and Q2 is the strategy space. Okay, yung decision on how much to produce is your own decision, and you're reacting to the other firms, to your anticipated or expected behavior of the other firm. Okay, so here we have constant marginal cost, C. Okay, so firm 2. Let's consider this problem from the perspective of firm 2. Q1 is given. Okay, that means wala kang control over Q1. That means from your perspective, you will come up with a guess. Again, this is the same language we had earlier, a guess about Q1, and sort of keep to that guess. So from your perspective, Q1 is something that you are trying to expect, trying to anticipate, right? Okay, but from the perspective now of maximizing your profits, since you cannot control Q1, you are quote unquote reacting to it. So ito yung price or demand function mo. This part specifically, di mo siya makokontrol. This is just a number. So for example, if Q1 is 10, B is 1. So this is just minus 10. Okay. So the first two terms are taken as a given. So it's now part of the intercept. So instead of A yung intercept, your intercept is this whole thing. Okay. So first question to the group. Pag tumaas yung pinuduce ni firm 1, what happens to this intercept? Okay, it gets smaller, so mag-shift down yung demand curve, right? Because that means the price, okay, the y-axis, you're measuring price at the y-axis. So since this is essentially in units of price, bababa ang price. The only impact on its output level is, bababa yung intercept. So this is what's depicted in this picture here. So if this is the original demand, right? This one. And this is from the perspective of firm 2, kaya yung x-axis is firm 2, ginagalaw niya yung Q2, ginagalaw niya yung Q2. Pag tumaas yung output ni Q1, bababa yung buong demand that is perceived by firm 2. In the stuff that you will read, so for example, by the end of next week, we'll be talking about that Vietnam coffee paper by Igami. And he will use Cournot basically. And if you shift down this demand function, this is basically what he is also doing. He is trying to come up with a residual demand. So these demand functions here is what's called residual demand, because this is what remains to firm 2 after tinanggal mo yung output ni firm 1. Kaya siya residual demand. And the point of this picture here is the more the other guy makes, the lower your residual demand is. Kasi konti na lang yung matitira sa'yo. Okay. So change in of anticipated output of firm 1 shifts firm 2's perceived demand curve down. Or up if bumaba yung output ni firm 1. Alternative choices of output of firm 1, different demands for firm 2, and therefore a different profit maximizing output for firm 2. Now, associated with each demand curve is an MR curve that is twice as steep. So whatever this is, again, number lang siya. The marginal revenue of firm 2 is just twice as steep. That's why instead of minus B, it's just minus 2B. Solving for Q2, you get this one, which is what's called a reaction curve. So bakit siya reaction? Kasi pag ang hula mo, firm 1 does Q1, your reaction as firm 2 is ito. Itong buong to, basically. Kaya siya reaction. So that's a way basically to put all of the concepts together. Kaya siya reaction. Pag ginawa ni, this is firm 2's reaction function or reaction curve. If Q1 does Q1, if firm 1 does Q1, then I react as firm 2 and provide Q2 star. And symmetrically, it's the same from the perspective of firm 1, since para-pareho yung cost nila. Okay, pareho yung demand nila, blah, blah, blah. Firm 1's reaction function is the following. And then meron tayong picture here. This one, the steeper one, is firm 1's reaction. And this, not less steep, or yeah, less steep, is firm 2's reaction function. Okay. Any questions so far? Mapunta tayo dito. Okay. So, drawing ko lang siya ulit dito. Like, this is literally text box. Things na sabi ko sa inyo na dati pa natin ginagawa. Nagdo-draw lang tayo. Draw something. Sorry, not draw actually. Insert, shape, line. Tapos, palalakihin mo, blah, 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 blah. And then, kung gusto mo na siyang i-upload, export na siya or save as. Kahit PowerPoint, pwede naman siguro. Okay, so this is RC1, which is this one. So pansinin mo natin si RC1, which is ito. Notice that it's a function of Q2, which is ito. Now, I have a question for the group. Ano ang reaction ni firm 1 if firm 2 produces 0 or exits the market? Oh, actually, this is firm 2. Ano ang reaction ni firm 1 if firm 2 exits the market? Dito mo siya makukuha. Ano ang value nito pag ito ay 0? A, sabi ni Firebert, A minus C over 2B. Diba? Ganun lang. That's how, basically, you just read it from the reaction function. Pag 0 to, mawawala ito. Ito na lang yung matitira. Which is why, if Q2, ito si R1, no? Ito si R1, the steeper one. If Q2 is 0, so tumingin ka dito. Ano ang Q1? Sagot is A minus C over 2B. Now, I will remind everyone that ano yung demand function natin? Demand, inverse demand, I should say. Yes. P equals A minus PQ. Okay, so that's the inverse demand curve. And let's remind everyone, ano ang sagot ng monopoly? Monopoly output. If given this curve. Oh, this is a review from the midterm. Ano ang monopoly demand natin dito? Ano ang marginal revenue natin? Sulit niyo muna. A minus what? BQ lang? Marginal revenue. Tama ba yan? Mali. May sumasagot. Hindi. 2B. Minus 2B kasi twice nga, di ba? Good. Yan. Equals what? MC? What is our MC? What's our MC? Our MC is C. Ayan, no, C. And they're both the same. No. So solve for Q. Q equals what? A minus what? C divided by what? Use the mic. So it's quick. Ayun talaga mag-mic. Okay, next. 2B. Does that look familiar to everyone? Minus B natin. Ang ganito. Para consistent. Is this familiar to everyone? I mean, familiar in the context of this picture? So ano to? Ano tong output na to? In words. It's the monopoly output of which firm? Of firm 1. Because if firm 2 produces nothing, firm 1 would like to do what? It would like to produce the monopoly output. Okay, so what about this one? Can someone explain this one? And remember, this is the intercept of RC2. So can someone explain this one in your own words? It's the same. I-reverse nyo lang yung labels. If Q1 is blank, then Q2 will want to produce blank. Ano? Correct. Which is the monopoly output. Does that make sense? Why else? Diba, that's what we know about monopoly, diba? Pag walang iba, ano yung gusto mong i-produce? Yung monopoly output. So kailangan ganun yung sagot. Kung iba yung sagot, then that means either there's something else in the model or there's something wrong. Okay? So thumbs up muna. Everyone gets that? Or hindi? Okay, some people say, sure. Okay, great. But here we have a more complicated concept. Why? Because, simulan natin dun. Let's say, nandito ka. Again, mag-i-insert lang tayo dito ng something. Insert a shape. Okay. Dito ka. Okay. So, hinihilera ko dito para nasa RC2 siya. Okay. So, my question to you is this. If firm 1 produces the monopoly output, does firm 2 want to produce 0? Ito siya. Q1 is now the monopoly output. Saan ka titingin para malaman mo kung ano yung sagot ni Q2? Sa reaction function 2. Ngayon, si reaction function 2, 0 ba ang Q2? Yes or no first? Ito, you guys are skipping the obvious again. Let's isa-isa na nga to. Yes or no first? No, hindi siya 0. So that means that cannot be an equilibrium. The fact that Q2 is 0 and Q1 is monopoly, it's not an equilibrium because yung expectations is iba-iba. Si firm 1 expects Q2 to exit, but Q2 will not do that. And in fact, he will produce something. So therefore, it's not a Nash equilibrium. Do you guys remember Nash equilibrium? And this is the key, important concept here, actually, that this picture here is just a reflection of Nash equilibrium. And Nash equilibrium simply states that the strategy of each player in the game has to be the best response to every other firm's output, and no firm has an incentive to change. But in this case, who wants to change? If Q1 is A minus C over 2B, ang expectation niya 0 ang Q2. Who wants to change? Firm 2. So therefore, hindi tama yung hula ni firm 1 na Q2 is 0. So that means hindi siya Nash equilibrium. Kailangan self-reinforcing yung hula ninyo. Okay, so what is this guy? Instead, I'm gonna point this as, give me a letter G. There you go. Let's say that's point G. So what is Q2? Gagamitin mo lang to, man. Gagamitin nyo lang to. So again, copy paste. Wait, mali. Copy paste. Copy paste. Buburahin natin to. Question is, ano yung Q1 ulit? Fraction. Sige, gawin pa natin maarte. Insert equation. Kasi fractions natin to. Diba? A minus C over 2B. Yun yung Q1. So this Q1 is actually nothing anymore. This numerator is 1. Gets nyo ba? So ano yung napansin nyo dito? There's this thing called the monopoly output minus 1/2 the monopoly output. Ano ang sagot dun? Kunwari, 1 peso minus 1/2 of 1 peso equals 1/2 of 1 peso. Make sense? So, copyan nyo lang to. Okay. Or, if you want to simplify it, it's just hindi na kailangan pagandahan yun. Kailangan ito lang. B. Okay? So this is actually 1/2 of the monopoly output of firm 2. So this is roughly should be about 1/2. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay. The process will continue. Is this the equilibrium? The answer is no. Why? Alamin natin. Say, ihilera natin yan dyan. And ano ulit yung sagot natin dito? Eh. 4B, di ba guys? Okay. Nasa 4B tayo. If Q2 is A minus C over 4B, ano ang sagot ni firm 1? Pareho ba sila ng sagot? Consistent ba? Remember, if ito yung output ni Q2, yung expectation ni firm 2, ano? Yung output ni Q1 is what? Anong tawag dito ulit? Monopoly output. Diba? Pag ito yung output ni Q2, ano yung ine-expect niyang output ni Q1? Monopoly output. Okay, correct. Tama ba ang hinala ni firm 2? Yes or no? Consistent ba ang kanilang actions? Yes or no? In other words, if from the perspective of firm 1, pag Q2 is ito, ang sagot ba ni firm 1 ito? firm 2's guess is wrong because firm 1 will produce at a different level. Correct. Kasi binabasa mo lang siya dito sa reaction function. And pag ganito yung Q2, hindi siya 0, pero ito. No. So actually, pwede natin drawing ng, parang ano to eh, parang ladder. So magsulat tayo ng line. Dashes siya, dashes. Okay? Tapos medyo para mas kita. Yan, gawin natin ganyan. Okay? So at first, mali. Diba? Tapos, mali ulit. Diba? Mali ulit yung ikala nila. Tapos, mauulit ulit yung mangyayari, diba? Mangyayari ulit yon. Kung ano man to, which again, we've said it's not the monopoly output. And again, I invite, nasa slides. And you can also calculate it. Oh, by the way, how would you calculate it? Anong isasaksak mo dito sa firm? Anong isasaksak mo dito? Sa reaction function. Pakipasok yung actual formula. Ano yung output ni Q2 at this point? Ano yung isasaksak mo para malaman mo kung ano yung Q1? Correct, 4B. Sasaksak mo siya dito para malaman mo kung ano to. And yung sagot, I think, is 3/8. Ano mang nakalagay dito? So, 3/8. Diba? Or I think it's 2/3 of 1/2, I think. Or something like that. Basta, again, you can turn it into a fraction of monopoly output. Since monopoly output is 1/2, 3/4, yun na, 3/4 of monopoly output. I think. And then, eto siya, magiging ganito. So, may pinupuntahan tayo. Diba? Kita niyo ba yan? Medyo maliit na siya. So, hindi ko na siya magawa. But as you can see here, may pinupuntahan tayo. Ano yung pinupuntahan natin, guys? On this picture. You can even zoom in. Ano dito sa picture na ito yung pinupuntahan natin sa prosesong to? Yung intersection ng reaction curves. Correct. At some point, these guesses will converge to the intersection. Now, the intersection is also what's called the Nash equilibrium because it fulfills the definition of Nash equilibrium. Pag ito yung Q1, Q2 is the correct response or the optimal response to that Q1. And from the perspective of firm 1, Q1 is the optimal response to that same Q2. So pareho yung kanilang expectation, and their expectations were seen to be correct, and therefore they have no incentive to change because each output level is the optimal or the best response, quote unquote best response to each other. Whereas in all other cases that we've talked about here, hindi siya yung best response. Kaya gumagalaw siya, kaya nagbabago. It's that easy. In fact, we have it here for an equilibrium outcome. Each firm is responding optimally to the optimal choice. Requires that both firms will have to be on the reaction curves. This happens at only one point, which is the intersection. So to get that, you would simply just put one reaction function into the other, and then you will get this one. A minus C over 3B. So gut check muna tayo. Is this less than or equal to monopoly output? Nope, it's not, because monopoly output is A minus C over 2B. In fact, this is 2/3 monopoly output because 2/3 times A minus C over 2B is A minus C over 3B. So it's literally 2/3 of monopoly output. And since pareho lang silang dalawa, since pareho lang silang everything, both of them will produce 2/3 of the monopoly output. Now, I have a math question for you guys. If I produce 2/3 of a monopoly output and you produce 2/3 of the monopoly output, what's the total output? Is that bigger than monopoly output or smaller? 2/3 plus 2/3. Ano yun? In the chat. Yeah, it's 1/3 the monopoly output. Oh, it's 2/3 actually. Because it's 2 over 3 times A minus C over 2B. So bumalik tayo doon. 2/3 of monopoly output plus 2/3 of monopoly output. Ano yun? Anong total yun? 2/3 of 1 peso plus 2/3 of 1 peso is how much of 1 peso? Sabi ni Mitch. Actually, Mitch, it's 2/3 of monopoly output, ha? 1/3 is bigger than QM. It's 1/3 greater than QM. Okay. Kasi 2/3 plus 2/3 is 4/3, which is 1/3 greater than QM. So Cournot will generate a total industry output of more than monopoly. That's the first lesson. Kung mas malaki yung output ni Cournot, anong masasabi natin sa price? Anong masasabi natin sa price? Pag mas mataas yung output, anong masasabi natin sa price? At kung mas mataas yung output, and given yung nasanabi natin sa price, anong masasabi natin sa consumer surplus? Remember, this is just demand curve, huh? You're just going down the demand curve. Ang sabi ni Jillian, joke daw. Kita niyo ba yun? Direct message ka. Dapat okay, first yung mga ano ninyo, yung mga chat ninyo, everyone nyo na. Kaya nyo na ba mag-everyone? Para everyone can learn. Okay?
Sir, I think everyone is off pa rin po.
Bakit? Oh, shoot. Ano ba? Ano pong ba nito?
I think every start of the meeting po,
Kailangan
it
ayusin.
resets.
Thank you.
Yes po.
Ayan. Pa-remind na lang sa akin kasi yun nga. Anyway. Yung mga sagot, I will do that. Yung sa, babalikan natin to. This is 2/3 of monopoly output. Agree? Kasi 2 over 3 times A minus C over 2B, which is monopoly output, is magka-cancel yung 2. Kaya yung 3 na lang yung natira. So double the monopoly output. Sorry, that's not double. 2/3 plus 2/3 is in fact 4 over 3. And that's more than the monopoly output because it's more than 3 over 3. Ngayon, pag mas marami yung produce mo, anong mangyayari sa presyo? And since kaya nyo naman mag-mic, mas madaling mag-mic, huwag na kayo mag-type. Dalawa lang yun, either aakyat or bababa. You have a 50-50 shot.
Sir, I think bababa po yung price since
Of
higher po
course.
yung quantity.
Siyempre, di ba,
Then-
demand function tayo, di ba, negatively related yung price tsaka quantity. Kung mas
Yes.
maraming quantity, mas mababa yung presyo. And kung mas mababa yung presyo, ikaw na yung, I'm sorry, what's your name, sir?
Mitch po.
Mitch. Oh, kung mas mababa yung presyo, ano mang masasabi mo sa consumer surplus?
Since higher po yung quantity tas lower price, bigger po yung consumer surplus.
Exacto.
mas closer po siya sa competitive outcome po.
Exactly. Oh, speaking of, what a wonderful way to do my next point. Nga pala, before that next point, ito nga pala yung, kayo na bahala sa derivations na to. I think tama naman lahat ito. Speaking of, babalik tayo dito. This plot actually gives you the three outputs. First, nasaan yung line natin? This line here, which I will color as, what's a nice color? Red. This is monopoly output. Diba? This is monopoly, and this is monopoly. And alam nyo ba na in a 2x2 space or an n-by-n space, a convex, alam nyo ba yung concept ng convex combination or average? Basically, this line is combinations of the two monopoly outputs. So dito sa gitna, kalahati Q1 na ito, or kalahati Q2 na ito, at kalahati Q1 na ito. So this line represents the total output of what? Monopoly. Hinahati lang ni firm 1 and firm 2. Now later on, we will talk about cartels. And in cartels, basically, they are sustaining a high price, low output quantity, which is this combination. And they will just share their output. So ito, kalahati ng yung monopoly output is A minus C over 2B, kalahati nun sa'yo Q2, kalahati nun sa'yo Q1. Parang ganun. Pag nandito ka sa gitna. Gawa natin ng picture yan. Why not? Diba? So ito yun. Parang medyo kalahati na to. So this is half monopoly output Q1. This is half monopoly output Q2. But the total output on this dot is equal to monopoly output. Everyone gets that? Clear? Okay. And then yung Cournot is this one, which I will copy paste. And babaguhin natin yung fill niya. Gagawin natin siyang blue. And yung output ni Cournot is basically this convex combination here, which I will fill in as blue also. Or green na lang. Green. And gagawin ko siyang mas makapal, so mas klaro. So first of all, kita niyo ba na mas mataas yung green line kaysa sa red line? Yes or no? So mas mataas yung green line kaysa sa red line. Which means, saan yung mas mataas na output? Cournot, which is the green line, or the red line, which is monopoly. Okay, so it's Cournot. Okay. Okay ba yan? Thumbs up or thumbs down? Everyone? Oh, may nagsa-thumbs up. Okay. Ngayon, may question ako. What is this intercept here? Na hindi pa natin na-fill out. Which is related to what Matthew? I want to say Matthew. I think si Matthew nagsabi. Matthew ba? Mitch? Mitch pala. Mitch, I think it's Mitch. Mitch said that this is said perfect competition. Now, I will tell you that this output here is consistent with perfect competition. So what is that output? Sulat natin yan dito. Yes. What? C equals cost equals price, yes? What's price again? A minus B Q. So therefore, Q here is A minus C divided by Everyone say the letter B. Correct. So ito yung perfectly competitive output. And ito rin yung output dito. Sa intercept. And ito rin yung output sa baba. Ito. So itong point na to, tsaka itong point na to, pwede mo rin siyang i-combine. So gagawa tayo sa pang line. And we will write this as yellow. So this yellow line is basically a combination of A minus C over B, wherein divided yung A minus C over B between Q1 and Q2. But along this line, pareho yung output. And ulitin ko lang yung tanong, ano yung output na yun ulit? Describe the output, not just tell me what the letters are, because we already know what the letters are. What's the letter? Well, how do you describe that output? This yellow line output? It's the perfectly competitive output. Now, is the perfectly competitive output greater than Cournot? Yes, because the yellow line is beyond the blue line. It's also clearly greater than the monopoly output, which the yellow line is greater than the red line. Okay, so that's the interesting thing that you'll see here in this graph. But Cournot is somewhere in the middle between monopoly and perfect competition. I think we can finish this because we only have a few slides left. So let's go. Now, there's a numerical example, which I will skip, as in this is literally just fill in these with numbers and solve for them. So I will leave it to you to tell me if the math here is right or wrong. It's all the same, okay? Just fill in, for example, C is 20, A is 120, B is negative, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so now we'll launch into many firms and different costs. Okay, so 2 firms yields more industry output and a lower price than monopoly, but less output and higher price than under perfect competition, which is exactly what we were just talking about. So would we generalize the Cournot model? Would introducing more firms bring it towards perfect competition? The answer is yes. Okay, so this is many firms. So now this big Q is just the sum of all of the different Qs. And your inverse demand function is now this one. And now the demand curve facing each firm is the following. Whereas, pag tinignan mo to, parang ang daming nag-minus. Diba? Dati isa lang yung nag-minus. Ngayon, ang dami na nila. Diba? Ang dami na nila. So parang yung residual demand here, the whole point here is nagiging mas flat yung residual demand ni firm 1. Kasi ang daming bumabawas, ang daming kumakain ng output or ng demand pala. So you can simplify the above using this. A minus B times Q minus 1. That means everyone else except for 1 minus B Q1. And this is called the residual demand for firm 1 after everyone else has sold to the market. And then you would then calculate the first order condition. And this is essentially just the same thing. Instead of Q2, this becomes Q everyone else minus 1. And look, it's almost the same thing, the same best response function, except ito na is everyone else's output and not just one firm's output. And generically, it's the same since everyone is facing the same problem. In general, person I's reaction is just the monopoly minus 1/2 of the total of everyone else's output. So in Nash equilibrium, each firm chooses a best response QI star that reflects a correct prediction of the outputs for the other n-1 firms. So again, inulit lang niya to. Inulit lang niya to. Since each firm is identical, each will produce in equilibrium the same amount. So that means Q not I star equals just n minus 1 times q star. Since we're trying to find out what the q star is, that's why n minus 1 pa rin siya. So itong q star na q not 1 or not I, you're just replacing it with this one. Okay. But this comes from the fact na pare-pareho yung cost nila. Okay, so this is a simplifying assumption to get to the point of what happens when this n becomes very, very big. So what is the equilibrium output? Again, I invite you to solve. So equate this one. This is now q star, and this is just q star. Put everything together, and it becomes a minus c over n plus 1 times b. So no monopoly, ano yung n plus 1, guys? Nung monopoly, nalala nyo ba? A minus c divided by blank times b. Ano yung blank? Okay, balikan nyo. And then, in general, pag more than 1 na siya, pag duopoly, magiging a minus c divided by n plus 1 times b, where n is 2. So 2 plus 1, that's 3. So that's why a minus c over 3b, which is something that we got earlier as well. So yung denominator, yung 3 tsaka yung 2, galing pala yun dito. Okay, so in general, as n goes to infinity, what happens? As n goes to infinity, what happens to each firm's output? Okay, will tend to go smaller, but we don't really care about each firm's output, but the total output. So n times q star. So it's this. So if you're aware of like limit theory, n divided by n plus 1, as n becomes very large, then magka-cancel out tong n tsaka n plus 1 essentially. And it will leave a minus c divided by b, which is the perfectly competitive outcome. So the bigger the n becomes, the more these two things will cancel out, and it will approach a minus c over b. And in the same way that the price will be this, and as n becomes very large, n divided by n plus 1 will become equal to each other. N divided by will just cancel out, become 1. So price becomes c. Mawawala ito because the n plus 1 becomes very, very big, and a divided by a very big number becomes 0. So P star will become C, which is the perfectly competitive outcome on the price side. Okay, so that basically repeats everything that we said here. The n divided by n plus 1 rule. Now, what about non-identical firms? Pag non-identical yung firms, then we start again with two-firm example. It can become quite difficult. Not difficult, but cumbersome notationally. So for firm 1 and firm 2, ito ulit yung mga best response functions. But take note that Q2's response is now equal to A minus C2 over 2B. Ano to? Again, paulit-ulit lang yung tanong ko. Everyone should know what this is. What is this? What's this? Kanino, we know it's monopoly profit, but whose monopoly profit is it? Same thing with firm 1. This is monopoly profit, but whose monopoly profit is it? Anyone? You can use the mic. See, since this one is connected to that one, whose monopoly profit is this? It's firm 1's monopoly profit, and this is firm 2's monopoly profit. In particular, they don't have to be the same because C1 and C2 are different. Okay, so this just becomes yung magkakaroon ng change sa reaction function. In this particular case, what happens is the cost of firm 2 goes down, and therefore the monopoly output for firm 2 goes up. I'm sorry, the cost of firm 1 pala goes down. The cost of firm 1 goes down, so the monopoly output of firm 1 goes up, okay? Relative to firm 2. Mali. So reaction function of firm 2 pala to. This is the cost of firm 2. So the cost of firm 2 goes up, the reaction function slides down. This one goes up, this one slides down. And that means that Q2 will be smaller than Q1 because mas costly ang output ni firm 2. So best response functions now reflect their own marginal costs. The position of each firm's best response function is affected by its marginal cost. Increases in marginal cost shift the best response functions inward. So kaya siya bumaba. Increase nga pala ito ng marginal cost. We should expect that low-cost firms will produce more than high-cost firms. However, the increase in output does not fully offset the decrease in output of firm 2. So there is a decrease in total industry output. So you can see here that there is a decrease in total industry output because if you draw a line here, which are again convex combinations of the old one, and draw another line through here, which are averages or combinations of the new one, saan mas mababa yung line? Dito sa bagong equilibrium. Kaya mas mababa yung total output. So you can solve for it. This is just when you input Q1. Actually, this is when you input Q2, because this is A minus C. The reason why you know it's Q2 is because of the C2 here. And then you're solving for Q1, and then you're solving for Q2. Whereas if you note here na meron ka na expression for the difference between C2 and C1, C1 and C2. Whereas before, if they're both the same C, then this just becomes A minus C. But if they're different, then they don't have to be A minus C. Here we've got the example of Untel in Cyrox, which is different from marginal costs, 20 and 40. So again, try the question. In fact, the practice homework is exactly that. Okay? You will be asked to solve a Cournot for 2 firms. Okay. Our final topic is this. What happens if there are many not identical firms? Similar to before, madali lang yan. Okay? Because what we're trying to do here is to write it out the following way. A minus B Q not I, which is output of everyone else, minus 2 times B Q star, which is the thing we're trying to find. Now, Q not I is the sum of the optimal amounts QJ star for each of the not I firms. So again, this is naghahanap tayo ng best response. So we write this out. And we note that Q star, which is the total, is just the sum of everyone else plus I. Therefore, you write it out as here. This is Q not I. And it will simplify to the following. Okay, so minus BQ minus, this becomes plus BQI. Minus 2 BQI. So magiging 1 na lang siya. Kaya nawala yung 2. So the Nash equilibrium is obtained by substituting the Nash equilibrium output into the industry demand curve. Substituting into the equilibrium output here. Dividing both sides of P and multiplying the right-hand side by Q star over Q star, that gives you the following. So this is very familiar already. In fact, this is the derivation of the learner index for individual Cournot competitors. Okay, where SI star is just QI star divided by Q star, which are the equilibrium outputs. This one is just the inverse of the market demand. So therefore, it becomes this one. P minus CI over P star equals CI star divided by eta, where eta is the elasticity of demand, or 1 over eta is the inverse of the elasticity of demand. if you were to now calculate the industry level, okay, so pansin nyo that each firm has this as the market power, right? Has this as the learner index. You can sum up over all of the firms in an industry. So you're summing up over the firms in an industry, weighted by the shares. That's why you're multiplying by the SIs. And then you will get the following: P star minus C bar, which is the average marginal cost, divided by P star. The right-hand side will be SI squared. Kasi you multiply each term by SI. So magkakaroon ka ng SI squared. I have a question. What do you call this term? It's the HHI, the Herfindahl index, which we defined way back. So aggregation to the level of the industry implies the following. You have HHI is related to the learner index through the elasticity of demand, or through the inverse of the elasticity of demand. Okay, so this is the derivation of the industry level learner index if there are many Cournot competitors. So pareho lang ito dun sa simple monopoly. But now, you have this SI term, kaya siya may HHI after you sum and weight by revenue shares. All right, any questions about any of this Cournot stuff? So you've got enough. Para tumimik kayo. Hello? Are you guys still there? Okay, parang wala na kayo. Anyway, this is just the learner index, and then you just sum the right-hand side and weight them by SI, which is what happens here. You multiply each term by SI, and then you sum them up. So that's why you get this HHI term here, which is directly comparable to the simple monopoly case for the learner index, which is essentially this one, except the share, since it's monopoly, is equal to 1. So 1 divided by eta. All right, that's it. I'll stop the share. And I'll stop the recording.